Welcome to The Lock Shop with Nielsen and Hustler, powered by Coolbet Canada.
Well, happy New Year, Lock Shoppers. What is going on? Great to be back for 2024. Apologies on yesterday. There was a little bit of a miscommunication as to when the Lock Shop was firing back up with the big guy coming back from the Spengler. Dusty, though, taking a little bit of a few days with the fam, as you can imagine, after being away at the Spengler. Doing a great job, by the way. Calling those games. Need a little bit of family time, but do not worry. The Lock Shop rolls on. I'm back, Andrew Patterson, along with our guy, JBM, Jake Bolin Moss from Coolbet. Talk a little puck today. I did get a email or a tweet from Lincoln Lewis, a lock shopper, who wanted some golf picks. So we will talk about the Century a little bit towards the end of the program. But Jake, we got some hockey to talk about, and we certainly have a very interesting final week in the National Football League to get to. What's going on? How was the holidays for you?
Holidays were great. I was just firing up a tweet there for us, get some promotion out, get people into the chat, back to chatting some bets. I'm excited. The holidays were great. Yeah. I had a few days off there, obviously the regular days that we all get here in Canada. But I've been working the sticks a little bit, and Patty's away right now in the DR, so I'm just trying to hold down the fort until he gets back.
Yeah, that's right. Lover boy Gregoire. Shout out to Patty. Put a ring on it. The biggest lock of 2023. Pat got engaged. So a big lock shop congratulations to he and his lovely fiance. Pat will be back in the mix next week as well. You know what? Listen, we'll get into the pucks and the NFL in a minute. But I know you're a big college football guy. And this is probably another reason why we should have been on the ball and done a show yesterday coming out of Monday. And I will say this, I started off 2024 in a very nice fashion with a Michigan-Washington moneyline parlay. And I can't take really any credit for it. I was just kind of going for who I wanted to win. I certainly haven't been paying as much attention to the college football season as you have been all season long, but I had to get your thoughts on an absolute thriller with Michigan coming back to beat Bama in overtime, and then the Huskies taking out the Texas Longhorns to set up a Washington-Michigan national championship game. What did you make of the two big games on Monday?
Well, listen, I was pretty fired up. I had a really good Monday, 6-1. I think I ended up going. There were some other college games earlier in the day before those college football playoff games. And, I was on Mich. I ended up just taking a money line, but spread would have been just fine too. What a crazy game, though, because, I had Michigan, so I was tweeting like I had Michigan, and I was saying it was the worst college football game I've ever seen. And it was a big-time feel it out in that first one. I know you watched both of them, but it just felt like, the one team was waiting for another to make a mistake, and then Bama did make the mistake with the fumble, and Michigan couldn't capitalize, and I don't know, it just felt like Michigan early on, especially that first half, was definitely the better team, but they just let Bama hang around long enough that it was as close as it was in the end, and then sure enough, one really great drive, which I thought they could have gone for two. I'm glad they didn't. Obviously, they went in overtime, but. What a wild game. And even the way it finished, like there was a timeout by Bama or timeout by Michigan, timeout by Bama, and then they called their play and it was a bad snap, which that center for Alabama was not good at all, really, in any part of that game, and ended up being a low snap. Milroe gets the ball and just tries to run it up the gut and nowhere to go, and that's the rest is history. So Michigan finally on to the national championship after a few years here of just getting stuck in the semis and not being able to get over the hump. So, and then we didn't get into the other game. But any thoughts on that Michigan game before we talk Washington, Texas?
I mean, as I say, I watched really one full college football game all year, and that was the game I went to, the Minnesota-Michigan game, when we were down there for the Chiefs-Vikes game. And I was so impressed with Michigan. I mean, they were, and again, I didn't have much to measure it against because I don't think Minnesota was certainly one of the toughest teams on their schedule. But that defense just seemed to be, I mean, it looked like, they had about 5 NFLers out there. And that'll probably be the case once the draft happens and we start looking back at this team in a couple of years. But they were so dominant. But listen, we're just taught to believe, oh, the SEC is the best. These SEC teams, when they play everyone else, they'll roll over them. And there still is that narrative that goes out there. So I was happy that Michigan won for that reason. But I just thought that their defense was so dominant. I mean, the amount of time they spent in the backfield and had what is it? Monroe? What was the quarterback's name for Bama? Milroe?
Milroe.
He was
Yeah.
running for his life. So I didn't blame Michigan actually for kicking the extra point because I thought the way they were playing at that point in the defense, that the longer the game went, the better chance they had to win. But like a lot of casuals, I was just sick of Bama. So nice to see Michigan get it done, even though I know there's, and like the beef, the bad blood in college football is so hilarious. Like you either love Harbaugh and Michigan or you absolutely hate them and they're the worst thing that ever happened to them. Although that's the same thing with Bama too, for that matter. I'm basically the end result of all this is I hope that Harbaugh comes back to the NFL.
Yeah.
The NFL is a better place when Jim Harbaugh's in it. So that is kind of how I hope. But listen, they deserved it. A big win. And the other team, like this other game, and again, this was just basically throwing a dart. I'm like, I saw Penix a little bit. He was awesome. Let's go for the underdog in the Pac-10 team. I was most impressed with how Washington's defense handled Texas. That was something that I wasn't sure they were going to be able to do. But they kept up putting up points. And in the second half, they really took over that game.
Yeah, I mean, the big question now is, what is going to triumph in this national championship on Monday? Is it going to be the Michigan defense that we see, have another stellar performance like they did against Bama? Or is it going to be the Washington offense that, kind of stifles that defense? Because, really Michigan didn't have an easy time moving the ball up until, that last drive that tied the game. Yeah. They struggled to move the ball a lot of the times. And it'll be interesting because that Washington defense was not great against the run early on. Blake Corum's a great running back for Michigan. He could make a huge impact in this game on Monday. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I just kept going back and forth. I haven't made a decision on a pick. I think Washington's up to 5 points now.
Michigan. The game right now, Michigan -5. And the total for the game is at 56. Washington plus 160 on the money line. Michigan -200.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. I think if the Michigan defense, it shows as good as they were against Bama, given Bama's offense, not necessarily a standout, stud offense by any means, but if that Michigan defense can hold true, I was leaning under when I first saw the line. I think it was 55.5 up to 56. That's better in the case if you like the under. But the thing is, we saw Washington really scored at will against Texas. They have that ability. It's going to come down to, how good of a game plan they draw up for Penix and the crew from Washington. Get some really good receivers on the Washington side too. Like, I'm excited. I think this is two teams that, we don't see a whole lot. Obviously Michigan a bit more, their storied history and all that, but they haven't really been here on the biggest stage. We've seen the Georgias, Bamas, Clemson's, LSU that one year was awesome. But these are two teams that we really haven't got to see both in a scenario like this. And I'm just fired up. Monday's gonna be great. We're gonna come up with a huge NFL weekend. And then your come down is going to be a national championship on Monday.
Playoffs are going to be set. I will say this. It is very nice of them to have those games on New Year's Day. The way it worked out this year, it was a lot easier to handle the terror and depression of the upcoming end of the NFL regular season, knowing that well, I don't even want to get into it, how few games there are left in the NFL, but no Monday nighter on week 17 or week 18. So to have those two games and to have this national championship game next week, we'll still get our football fix on Monday. Next Monday on the Lock Shop, we'll bang out some picks and get you guys to give us a more educated look at the national championship game. All right, we're going to get to the NFL, and I will fire off a couple century picks before the end of the program. But let's quickly talk some pucks. I mean, maybe we should start with Canada's team, the Winnipeg Jets, who are.
I thought you were talking about the World Juniors there for a second, but yeah.
You know what? Okay, listen, this is probably going to be sacrilege here, but I will admit I've never really been a huge World Junior guy. And again, sometimes doing the show, you sort of have to talk about it. But I'm sort of a wake me up in the semis guy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't pay a lot of attention to the Canada-Latvia game or whatever happens beforehand. I mean, to be honest, I think like a lot of fans, my biggest interest was, how's Jets first rounder Rucker McGrory doing? What's the last Monson doing on Sweden? And I think a lot of fans are like that. Like, when we were younger, I mean, hell, 25 years ago, when this really sort of became 25 years ago, whatever the phenomenon that it was, and the 1999 event was here in Winnipeg, it was a different world. I mean, we didn't have the NFL playing over 3 days over the weekend. There just wasn't a lot of stuff going on during the holidays, and you'd turn it on and listen. TSN did a great job of creating the event that it's turned into. But like, I don't know. There's some people out there that I think take this tournament way too seriously. And I didn't lose any sleep that Canada lost yesterday. I mean, listen, I love a great game, and often those semis and the gold medal game is really, really must-watch stuff. But no, and listen, if you're one of these people that's firing off Instagram messages to one of the kids on the team, take a lap, take a long look in the mirror and get a life. So yeah, but I'll tell you what, I mean, if you're a Canadian hockey fan right now, if you're an Oiler fan, they are back big time.
They are.
The Leafs have been rolling. A nice win last night in LA. And man, what's happening here in Winnipeg is really I don't want to say it's unbelievable, because I think for a lot of time people have thought that the talent was there. But I mean, the Jets come back last night to beat Tampa 4-2. It's now 26 games in a row that they have allowed 3 goals or less. And it's usually 2. And they play the same way night in and night out. It's the most consistent team I've ever seen since the Jets came here to 2011. And I had to give our buddy Jay Fresh a shout out. If you see him, he's one of the guys with these models, and he does player cards. And he kept on running. He kept on running the numbers at the start of the year, and it kept on showing the Jets to be either at the top or winning the President's Trophy. And he was just put out. He goes, I don't know what to tell you. My model's broken. Well, many of us saw what he did last year predicting Boston running away with it, and went over to Coolbet and jumped on the Jets. 60-1 to win the cup at the time, 50-1 to win the President's Trophy. And needless to say, those numbers have dropped precipitously. The futures aren't up right now. Last time I looked, the Jets had dropped down to 22-1. And of course, the Oilers, they had that ridiculously bad start. They won 8 in a row. They lost 3 in a row. Well, now they're back beating up on teams. And I think it's pretty clear. I mean, it's kind of wild right now when you look at the West. And I think, and I'm sure most of the people in the EST chat will agree, I mean, the Oilers are going to be a playoff team. I mean, like, there's still a long way for them to go to get into the top 3. I mean, the Kings right now are that team, 45 points. They've only played 34 games though. So I guess they've got 1 game in hand on Edmonton. So they've really have closed the gap, and they're now 4 games up. But let's assume that those 3 teams, Vancouver, Vegas, and LA, are going to be in. Let's assume that the Oilers are going to be in. And when you look at the top of the Central, it's kind of hard to imagine that changing. So
Nope.
in a lot of ways right now, the Preds, the Coyotes, the Kraken, the Blues, the Flames, and our hated rivals, the Minnesota Wild, are all battling for one spot right now. And that's why a game like last night, like between Calgary and Minnesota, was so massive in these head-to-head matchups. Everyone, I'm sure, outside of Edmonton in that group is hoping the Oilers can somehow lose. But I don't know about you, Jake. I mean, we're both out of the market. It seems, especially the way they've turned it around and are playing right now, it seems almost impossible to conceive that the Oilers would take a step back to where they were earlier on. The big question is whether they get into the top three or are they a wild card spot right now? So you've got good things happening in Winnipeg. You've got good things happening in Edmonton. I mean, the entire season's been a dream for Vancouver fans.
Yeah.
And obviously the Leafs are just trucking along doing their thing. They never seem to win in regulation, although they did last night.
Yeah.
But in the NHL today, it doesn't matter. I was thinking about what an all Canadian parlay would have been last night if you took the Leafs, the Jets, the Flames, and the Oilers. And I guess Vancouver Ottawa was an all Canadian game, so I mean, maybe you keep that one out. But there's a lot of good things happening with these Canadian teams right now, and I imagine that will be good for excitement at the book as well as we get into the new year and these teams kind of push forward towards the playoffs.
Yeah, just be happy you're not Sens fans. I mean, I know, I know a lot of fans across the rest of the league aren't a fan of Leaf fans, which we saw. Did you see those stats a few weeks ago? I was tweeting about them. Some guy, they were putting out polls, and I know it was a very small sample size, but how much more the Leaf fans were hated than really any other fan base across the league.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the most accurate fan poll of everyone. And listen, we know why it is. And I mean, this is not a shot at you or the Leafs. I mean, being an original six team, and Montreal is right there too. I mean, if you go to a Leaf or Habs game in Winnipeg, I mean, Oiler fans, let us know. I mean, I've never been and seen either of those teams come to Edmonton, but I would imagine it's the same as it is in Winnipeg and in Calgary and in Vancouver. I mean, the arena all of a sudden shows up with a few thousand people. And the thing about it, about Jake, is that, Leaf fans behave like they're in the midst of a dynasty when they have not won since 1967. Now, I know you have a bit better of a grasp on reality. That is not always the case. But hey, listen, you roll into visiting buildings in numbers, pump your chests. It makes for great atmospheres, but it also makes you the most hated team around the league. And listen, the Leafs weren't just in Canada. I mean, you looked around, the only team I think that didn't have Leaf fans on their list was Seattle. That's because they haven't been around long enough to hate the Leaf fans yet.
Well, you know what it is, Huss? The problem is there's a reason why all these Leaf fans travel is because it's cheaper to travel and go to a game somewhere else than it is to go to a game in Toronto. So, this is kind of, you're stuck doing, like, we go to Buffalo, we're probably 50-50 in Buffalo, like a lot of times.
Last game in Buffalo for the Leafs. Did you make that trip down?
No, I didn't head down. That one. The Leafs have been on a bit of a skid here. The win last night was nice, but the goaltending situation.
I'm pretty sure in that game Buffalo put up 9 on them.
Right. That was
I just had to stick that in. But I'll tell you what, the overall, I mean, last night was a good example. There's a lot of good teams in Canada, and I will say this: maybe this is a nice prop you guys can get up on the on that I think a lot of people can get through that we'll get into. Give us a prop on will a Canadian team win the Cup this year? I mean, that I think is something. It would be a lot of fun. I'd love to know what that number is. Obviously you've got contending teams in Edmonton and Winnipeg, in Toronto and Vancouver. I think you can legitimately say right now 4 teams that you can make an argument could be there at the end. I would love to know what that number is right now. And to be honest, that would be a fun one just to have in the NHL futures throughout the season to see. I mean, you might see some teams fall off and the number might go up. But in and around it, I would make the argument that there is the best chance for a Canadian team to win the Cup in a long time this year, with the way those 4 teams in particular have played through the first half of the season.
Yeah, listen, I mean, that might be something, it can sometimes be tough game to game because, the future's got to come offline and things can change with injury and stuff. But I'm looking at the All-Star break here, early February. I'm thinking maybe that's something we try to get online during that little weekend break and see what number we're at. Because, I mean, that's only about a month away. It might be a little different, but yeah, you know what? Speaking of props, we had I don't know if you saw this on Twitter. I think I tagged you in it, but we had a Twitter user reach out last night off one of our tweets and said, "Can you give us McDavid to reach 1,000 points this season?" And he tagged Dusty and Lieutenant Eric, so probably an EST guy. So then I reached out to our guys. It was actually Ev Dog, and he got on it. So it is live right now in the exclusive section, and it's under the lock shop. It says Connor McDavid to reach 1,000 career points by the end of the 2023-24 regular season. I think last night he hit 900. He had a couple more. I think he's at 902 or 903 maybe.
Yeah, so I've got it right here.
Yeah.
He's at 903.
Right.
And he's
so he would need another
3 points for the season. So essentially, this is a bet for McDavid to hit 150 points this year. They need another 97 to do that.
Right.
And he's got 49 games to do it. Tell you what, when you think about how slow of a start that he had, missed a couple of those games. Now, again, he'd have to play in pretty much every one of these games to do it. But I don't know if I'm betting against Connor McDavid going on a 2-point-a-game clip for the rest of the year. What did he have last night? 5?
He's right there. Like, his skill level is so above and beyond. And you see, like, he's obviously healthy again when he's doing stuff like he was doing last night. The goal he scored was unbelievable. That I think the first assist he had, like a spinorama pass out to the front of the net. I know Oilers fans know what I'm talking about. He's unbelievable, and I know they want it up. Oilers don't play again until Saturday, so that'll be online for a few days here. If you want to get on board, you want to even just sprinkle it and join the ride, then it's there. I'll have some more exclusives that I'll fire up for everybody today, but slow night, 2 NHL games, and some NBA, which we don't necessarily always get into, but yeah, I mean, we can go back to the hockey talk. What else you got on the Jets? I mean,
well, it's just so fun to be watching this team night in and night out. And I mean, if the one thing, if people are outside of the market or just wanting to throw down, I told you this streak of 26 straight games with under 3 goals or more, and more often than not, it's 2. I mean, if you were just hitting the Jets opponents total under, you probably would have won like 21 or 22 out of these games. I think sometimes they basically just put it to 2.5 now, like when they're actually favored. But man, deep team, everyone's pulling in one direction. They're doing it without Kyle Connor right now. And I guess we're going to hear all-stars named coming up in just I think maybe tomorrow they're going to name one all-star player from every team, and then everyone's going to vote on the other 12. I don't know how you choose on Winnipeg. I mean, it probably ends up being Hellebuck. But the funny thing about Hellebuck is as brilliant he's been over the last few years, he hasn't had to be like, his numbers are amazing and they keep getting better. But it's the way the team is playing in front of him that is making his job a whole lot easier. And it has been somewhat of a revelation to many people that follow this team here in the middle of the country. But it's definitely a good thing. As far as these 2 games tonight, and we've got the Devils and Caps played again. The Caps were played Pittsburgh last night.
Yep.
So this is sort of a tough spot for them going head back to back. That's a big reason why New Jersey is minus 175. Let me just quickly ask you about the Leafs. They played a real tough game last night. Very impressive, shutting out the LA Kings. At least for one day, you guys aren't talking about goaltending. Martin Jones getting it done.
Yep.
But we know that these games, second day of back-to-backs, when you're playing down a few levels maybe from team, there's always that possibility of a let-up. I mean, are you nervous at all about this game against Anaheim tonight?
I'm waiting to see who's going to be the starter, Huss. So I don't know if you heard about this Swedish guy we got down in the minors, but he's been called up. Dennis Hildeby is his name. He's 6'7". He's a monster. They call him the Hildebeest. And I'm interested to see him play. I mean, I don't watch a lot of the Marlies, obviously, as you can imagine. So, I'm not too dialed in, but you see what you see on Twitter and people talking about him. It kind of is a good spot. It's the Ducks, and not a great team by any means. And he's never played an NHL game. So, to get his first start against what would be deemed an easier matchup, the only problem is, like you said, they're coming up a back-to-back against a tough team. It's a physical game last night. A lot of chippy plays. Dubois had a dirty play on Matthews. So I'm sure you'll be happy to hear that. He's a public enemy number one right now. Benoit fought. So
remember when all that nonsense happened a couple of years ago between the Jets and the Leafs, and everyone wanted to kill Neil Pionk there in Toronto? Dubois was right in the middle of that too. Like, he went and did, if I recall correctly, he's always sort of taken runs at Matthews.
Yeah, I think him and Matthews have always had a little thing going on. So
yeah,
it's an interesting one, right? I mean, back to back, you're on the West Coast. I think a lot of people last night thought they were probably going to struggle. They'd been on a bit of a downward spot. 2 periods, they looked great. They were kind of just holding on in the third, but Jones was really good. A ton of block shots last night. I mean, if they play like they did last night, I think they roll the Ducks. It's just a matter of, are we going to get the same team? Because night to night with this team, it's Jekyll and Hyde. One night you're like, this team is world beaters. They could beat anybody. And then the next night you're like, how can these players, be this bad? How can we go from this good to this bad? It's crazy. And I think that's always how the Leafs have been. So I don't know why I'm ever surprised by anything like that. But I don't know. I'm interested to see what happens with the goaltending. That is the main storyline of the night, if they're going to give this kid a start or not, with Sammy down in the minors now, or doing his training session, whatever.
To me, this pick is one of two. You either just hold your nose and play the home dog at plus 166, or you go onto the other side and say, well, listen, maybe they just keep it rolling. They're a much better team than Anaheim. You take the puck line. And I think that probably means they win by like 4-3 in OT or something like that. That is the one thing. If you wanted to take Anaheim plus 1.5, the Leafs do have a knack, maybe as much as any of the so-called top teams in the league, of waiting till overtime or a shootout to win games, having done it only 8 times. So maybe we'll look at that. I got to figure out something for the play of the day, which we'll crank up a little bit later on. I just saw, Mark in the chat talking about the trade between the Raptors and the Knicks. Pretty cool to see RJ Barrett come home. Nice to have, some Canadian content. I know the Raptors were the ones that got beat by the Pistons, right? Did that happened?
They did
that weekend. Yeah, that's not a great piece of history.
Of course, it was going to be the Raptors. Yeah. Like, of course, it was going to be the Raptors. It was lining up so perfectly, and sure enough,
no, that was unfortunate. But the Raptors are actually in Memphis tonight, they're, I mean, just a slight underdog in this game. Memphis minus 115, Raptors minus 102. So we'll look to see how these new players go on. I'll be a lot more locked in on basketball once we get through NFL season. And man, we've got one more big week. Hey, you're in the GTA in and around. This scenario with the Buffalo Bills is absolutely crazy. That they could either win the AFC East with a win over the Dolphins,
right,
or potentially miss the playoffs. And of course, I think what needs to happen is Pittsburgh needs to win. And Pittsburgh's getting the Ravens, who have clinched the number 1 seed. I mean, all of their top players, I would assume, are going to be rested. It would tell you a lot about that rivalry and how much Baltimore hates Pittsburgh if they threw out any of their guys that are meaningful, that are starters in this game, now that they've already done what they set out to do, and that's have home field going through the playoffs. I know there is somewhat of an argument that, do you want guys to sit off 2 weeks in a row before coming back? I'd rather have a healthy and rested team going into the second one. But yeah, the Mafia in this Bills Patriots game, which is that's the late game. It is the Sunday nighter.
Bills Dolphins. Sorry, you said Patriots. Dolphins.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, Bills Dolphins in Miami. Bills are 3-point favorites in this game, and I think they're catching Miami at a real good time. Chubb now out for the season after being injured last week. That really hampers the pass rush. And, listen, the Bills haven't looked great the last couple weeks, and the Pats always seem to know how to play them tight. Like, I don't know how confidence inspiring the last couple of weeks have been, but what they did before that to get to this position, I think speaks for itself. And I'm really looking forward to this game, especially if it does come down to the scenario, which is quite possible, that win and you're in and your division champs, lose and you're out and not even in the postseason.
I don't know if we've ever seen anything like this. Another funny one. I know we're on the Bills, but before I forget this, I saw a tweet that said the Falcons have the potential to be anywhere between winning the NFC South or having the 8th overall pick, something like that, in that sort of range. Which it just explains how bad the NFC South's been this year. I think it will be the Bucs. They got the Panthers this week. It's their division to lose at this point, but just another very interesting. So many scenarios, Huss, that like we're sitting on here. What happens with the Jags? I got that over 9.5 win total bet that I'm sitting on. I need them this week. Like I need them to.
Well, the good thing for you is that they have
what's going on. What happens with the Texans? I think the Texans can still.
Well, every one of those teams. Like let's just talk about the AFC South for a minute, because I have that Texans division future we talked about earlier this year in the lock shop. I mean, it sure would have been nice if they had, been able to, if Stroud hadn't missed 2 games and there'd be in a bit better of a situation. But the Indy-Houston game is winning in. One of those teams will get to 10 wins and they will be in. Just looking, is that an early game or a late game? That is that's the Saturday night game. Beautiful. So essentially, we've got a playoff game on Saturday night. But just schedule a quick update for you folks. Steelers, Ravens, Saturday afternoon. Ravens will be resting starters. Steelers are 3.5-point favorites in Baltimore. And then the Texans and the Colts are playing at night. Houston is a 1.5-point favorite in Indy. So one of those teams, either Houston or Indy, will win. And then they need to hope that the Jags lose to the Tennessee Titans. Now, the Jags are 5-point favorites in Tennessee. And I think the start of Beathard last week had to sort of foreshadow that, Trevor Lawrence wasn't right. We know that we've got this game to win the division next week. Let's give him the week to rest, to be better. And they still ended up beating a brutal Carolina team. So listen, the odds are heavily in the Jags' favor. If you look at CoolBet right now, actually in the NFL futures section, the Jags are minus 233 to win the division. And then the Texans and Colts are both plus 435, which is interesting because the Texans are a minus 1.5-point favorite. Would have thought that maybe they'd be a little shorter of a number than the Colts, but essentially that's all there. And we won't go through all these right now, but the still up right now, if you want to bet defensive rookie of the year, comeback player of the year, Joe Flacco is now plus 120 for that. And Kevin Stefanski, while we're at it, I know there was all that talk about, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Dan Campbell for coach of the year? What about D'Amico Ryans? Kevin Stefanski's now minus 1,000 with what Cleveland has done. And it's just hilarious that they're having this season without Deshaun Watson. When you think of all the bullshit that team has gone through since they signed him, gave him the guaranteed deal, all of that, they didn't need him. There was other guys. They just had to wait for the elite Joe Flacco to come out of retirement.
Well, I mean, Huss, if the Colts make the playoffs, I think who's their coach? Steichen? Like, he's had a great year.
Yeah,
In
he's
terms of
10 to
Anthony
1.
Richardson goes down early in the season and 10-1. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like a lot of scenarios this week. I'm on the playoff predictor right now just to kind of give us an idea of what it could all look like. So, I had all the favorites with all the favorites winning, just as the odds state. That doesn't mean they're my favorites by any means. With all the favorites winning, we'd have Baltimore 1 seed, Bills 2 seed, Chiefs 3 seed, Jags 4 seed, and because I think the Chargers are favored, right? So that would be if KC loses. So
Browns are locked in at 5,
and then Cleveland at 5, Miami at 6, Houston at 7, and then it would be San Fran at the 1, Dallas at the 2, Detroit 3, Tampa 4, Philly 5, Green Bay 6, and Los Angeles 7. That's assuming all the favorites win, which never happens, people. So don't take that for what it is. But just little tweaks to this, Huss. So if the Colts beat the Texans, they become the 7th seed. If the Jags lose to the Titans, the Steelers get in the 7th seed. Whoever wins the Texans-Colts matchup wins the division, and the Jags would be out. So just like some crazy, crazy stuff with how little you can make a tweak. Like I said, you take the Jags to a loss.
For Miami to miss. What has to happen for the Bills to miss? They have
Bills
to
miss.
lose
So
to Miami
for sure.
Pittsburgh has to win. I think there's one other thing, or is that it?
So it looks like so someone's gonna win, obviously Texans, Colts. Pittsburgh's got to win. So right now I have Miami winning, and the rest of the favorites, and the Bills would be out. I think if the Steelers lost, the Bills are in. So I just double checked that. If the Steelers lose, the Bills are in. Doesn't matter about the Texans-Colts game. They would be one of those teams would be in. I don't know the other scenario here. It would be Bengals. No, that doesn't.
Bengals are out. Bengals are out. As bad of a season, or as trying of a season as it's been for the Chiefs, it was an absolutely beautiful thing to knock out the Bengals and the Broncos at the same time last week with their win against Cincinnati. So they are done. Denver's done. The Raiders are done.
I got to hear us. So if the Jags lose, the Bills would be in. So they probably got their eye more on that Pittsburgh game. I don't know. Does Vrabel have one more in the chamber to be like, all right, I still got it.
Listen, Mike Vrabel is going to, he will be playing that game like it is the Super Bowl. I mean, they will not leave anything out there. And listen, it should be fun. The Chiefs won't be playing anybody. They're 3.5-point underdogs against the Chargers. But again, they're locked in the 3 seed. Cleveland won't be playing anybody. They're locked into the 5 seed. Which will be nice. They can sort of get ready for that game, against whoever wins the AFC South. And I think it's pretty clear that Cleveland's going to be a favorite. Cleveland will be a road favorite in week 1 of the playoffs against either Houston, Indy, or Jacksonville. Well, like their defense is, and I'll tell you what, I mean, just back to the futures for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
The Cleveland Browns at 14-1 to win the AFC might be the best value bet on the board. And I know people are going, what are you talking about? Listen, they are the one team that I think could go in. And if it's a Cleveland-Baltimore Ravens playoff game in Baltimore, anything can happen. Flacco
don't
going
tempt me with a good time.
Like, listen, it would be like, and that's what would happen. Like, if the favorites won, in the basically, if the Chiefs win and either Baltimore, Miami wins as the favorite, and Cleveland wins, that's your week 2 game. Cleveland at Baltimore, the return of Joe Flacco, Super Bowl hero, who did orchestrate arguably the greatest run for a quarterback
Yeah.
in NFL playoff history with 11 touchdowns and no picks.
Well, listen, and you wouldn't trust anyone further down that list. Cleveland would be your last bet to win the AFC. You wouldn't trust the Jags. You wouldn't trust the Texans. You wouldn't trust the Colts, Steelers. I mean, obviously not. So, like if you're going to take one of those top 5 teams, why not take the longest one and just ride with the Browns?
With the best defense. Like,
Exactly.
Honestly, that number, and I mean, listen, as a Chiefs guy that has a Chiefs future, like, I probably won't be doing it, but just as far as investing goes, if we're thinking about a team that could do it, and it would be actually beautiful if the Browns, like, listen, they've got such great fans. They've suffered for so long. It truly would be amazing if they did it. And it would be even better if they did it with Deshaun Watson, nowhere near the field and nowhere near the team, considering what they've gone through. Just before we finish up, here's the future totals right now, gang, for the AFC and NFC. And for everyone that's in the chat, I'll read these out. Why don't you give us your, I think the best value pick of any of these teams to win their conference is Cleveland at 14-1. But here, Baltimore's plus 150. The Bills are plus 350.
How crazy is that? How crazy is that?
Hey, you know what? It's all about that team that gets hot late. And Bills, I don't even think they're that hot going into this.
They'd have home field for 2 playoff games if they beat Miami. They'd have 2 home playoff games, assuming they win, obviously, wild card weekend.
Yeah. Who knows? Cleveland beats Baltimore in round 2. They could be hosting the AFC Championship game.
There you go. They could have 3.
Could be totally. So the Bills are plus 350. The Chiefs are plus 450. And I will just say this about the Chiefs. They have never had a defense like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I still believe that at some point, guys are going to start catching passes. They cannot just kick field goals from the red zone forever. So they'll be a dangerous team and a tough out, but I totally understand why they're not at their usual spot at the top of the odds charts. The Dolphins have dropped to 6-1. And I think injuries and the uncertainty about this weekend has sort of put them there, especially as a home dog with the opportunity to win the division. And then Cleveland at 14-1. And then, of course, you got Jags, you got the Texans, 20-1, 30-1, 50-1 for the Colts, and 100-1 for the Steelers. NFC, the Niners minus 125, locked and loaded, resting their guys this week. And then it's Dallas at plus 350, Philly at 6-1, the Lions at 8-1, Rams 25-1, and then Bucks at 50, Seattle 60, Packers 70, and then the Saints and Falcons, which I don't know really we really need to get in. To me, the one number that sticks out is Cleveland. And I'll say this. I've never been a believer in Detroit. I know we just had them on the suspended list.
Yep.
Like, do I think they're going to win the NFC? No, I don't. But I think they are going to be a very, very dangerous team come playoff time. And what did you say the NFC would be right now? The Cowboys would be the 2 seed. The Lions, after getting screwed by the refs in Dallas last week, would be the 3 seed. Who would likely be the 6 seed? Would that be Lions Packers?
It would be Lions Packers, assuming all the we have all the favorites here winning. So yeah, assuming all the favorites win, Lions Packers
would be something else. Mr. G. Brooks says the Panthers are going 17-0 next year and are bringing back Cam and Steve Smith.
Saw that.
I'm in. G. Brooks is just doing a full-fledged comedy show here tonight. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. So listen, we'll get into the games and we'll make our game picks on Friday's show. Tomorrow's show, we're gonna have a heck of a lot more hockey to talk about, which will be nice. We can get in, bang out do a little partner parlay. And I'm sure, I guess, let's just see. I don't have the Oilers schedule in front of me, but I would imagine that they are playing tomorrow, which means the EST boys, I'm sure, will have one. Man, we just missed it last night. Had the Jets money line, had the Ehlers goal, just missed the Morrissey assist, and he's usually in on that. Yeah, tomorrow night the Jets are in San Jose to take on the Sharks. And Edmonton. Oh, Edmonton's off until Saturday. Yeah, you mentioned that. So anyways, you ESTers, you'll have a little bit more time to get over there and get on that McDavid prop if you think that he can drop 97 in 49 and get to that 1,000 this season.
Hey, listen, we'll get the chat involved tomorrow as well. Maybe we can get a nasty chat parlay or two, depending on what they got. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff coming up for the rest of the week, and then back to our regular scheduled programming with Dusty next week.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So listen, lock shoppers, think about come locked and loaded with your shot props, and we've actually had a couple nice winners from that group. So we'll do that tomorrow. We'll get into a bunch of hockey picks. But just before we go, I should hit the Century because it does start tomorrow.
All right.
I have to admit, everything that's happened with Liv in the PGA Tour, as someone that loves golf, that bets on golf, I'm not really all fired up. It's like, when are the majors this year? Like, I certainly don't care about the Liv tournaments, but a lot of these PGA ones. That being said, this PGA event this weekend, it is the Century Tournament of Champions. There's a lot of good golfers in this mix. The where are we here? The Century.
Go down to the Century there on the popular side, Huss.
I know. Unfortunately, I think I've had this one open for so long. I need to open up a new need to open up a new window. So the Century, here we go. Scotty Scheffler is the favorite. No question about that. Vic Hovland 10-1, Morikawa 12, Aberg, Cantlay, Homa 14, Schauffele 16, Spieth 25. I have a hard time looking high up on the board. Like, what have these guys been doing for the last 4, 5, 6 weeks? Who's in form? I don't know. So I've got a little sprinkle on my guy, Tony Finau. That's actually dropped to 30-1. And another lock shop favorite, Tom Kim, 25-1. So that's where I'm at on it. But again, early in the golf season, as long as football is going on, very limited sprinkles. And the minute that Super Bowl is finished, we really dive into it on a weekly basis. So there you have it. It's all up at CoolBet. You can get placed top 10, top 5s, top 10s, top 20s as well. Shorter field. There's some tournament head-to-heads. So if you have been jonesing for some PGA Tour golf, some of the best in the world, they're teeing it up in the Century today. Jake, good stuff today. Enjoy your Leaf game tonight, late night. Man, those are the Eastern time zone. What time does that game start? 10:30?
10:30 last night, 9 o'clock tonight. So
9 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, I believe it's only 9 tonight is Eastern time. So they must be 6 o'clock over there. They're starting an early one since it's the Ducks. Weird. Last night was 10:30 and it was a nightmare.
Yeah, well, at least they won. There's nothing worse than seeing your team get your ass kicked when you have to wait till 1 o'clock to do it. Lock Shoppers, great to see y'all. Thanks for everyone chopping it up in the chat. Schickster, I know Aussie Rules is coming. You keep me on top of that. We're gonna definitely need to get in on some Schickster, your contribution to the Lock Shop is gonna be some Aussie Rules preseason futures. Who's going to win it? Who's going to win it all this year? Get the scouting reports going. Bring them to the Lock Shop. I'll ride with you on those. JBM, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for doing this. Lock Shoppers, take it easy. Have a good one tonight. I'll hit a play of the day later on the CoolBet socials, and we'll get back to a busy slate of hockey tomorrow here in the Lock Shop, and then a full slate of NFL picks on Friday heading into Week 18. And do or die time for a lot of teams in the NFL playoffs. Thanks again to CoolBet for their support. Turn it over back to the EST guys, and we'll catch you tomorrow in the Lock Shop.